Go home, lady. The words cut through the morning air like a knife. 500 soldiers erupted in laughter. Sergeant Tyler Braxton stood there smirking all 240 pounds of muscle and arrogance while the crowd roared their approval. Colonel Sarah Brennan felt every eye on her, felt the mockery, felt the dismissal. 52 years old in a business suit being told she didn't belong by a man young enough to be her son. She could walk away, accept the humiliation, let them win, or she could remove her blazer and step onto that mat. 2 minutes and 17 seconds later, Braxton would be screaming on the ground with a dislocated shoulder, and Sarah's life would never be the same. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the end of this incredible story. And comment below with your city so we can see how far this story travels around the world. The morning at Fort Carson started like any other demonstration day, but Sarah Brennan knew better. She'd been doing this job long enough to smell trouble before it arrived, and today it arrived wearing combat fatigues and an ego the size of Colorado. "Ma'am, you really should wait in the command tent," Captain Jennifer Hayes said, falling into step beside Sarah as they crossed the parade ground. General Webb specifically said the budget meeting could wait until after the demonstration. "The budget meeting is over, Jennifer. Finished 20 minutes early." Sarah adjusted the strap of her briefcase. "I thought I'd observe the training, see what Fort Carson's so proud of." "It's just Sergeant Braxton showing off again," Hayes muttered, then caught herself. "Sorry, ma'am. That was unprofessional." "But accurate." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Hayes hesitated. "He's skilled. Very skilled. Just not particularly humble about it." They approached the massive circle of troops surrounding the demonstration area. 500 soldiers, Sarah estimated. Maybe more. The crowd was 3 deep in some places, everyone jostling for a better view. In the center, a regulation combat mat had been laid out, and circling it like a predator was Sergeant Tyler Braxton. He was exactly what Central Casting would send if you ordered intimidating soldier. 6'4", carved from granite, with the kind of muscular development that spoke of serious gym time. His shaved head gleamed in the morning sun, and his voice carried across the entire field without effort. "The key to hand-to-hand dominance," Braxton announced, dropping a sparring partner with a brutal hip throw, "is establishing psychological superiority before physical engagement. Your opponent needs to know they're beaten before you even make contact." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Sarah noticed several Pentagon officials standing on the command platform taking notes. Admiral Catherine Ross was among them, her face unreadable. "Captain Hayes, who authorized a Pentagon observation today. General Webb arranged it last week, ma'am. Some new combat integration assessment. I assumed you knew." Sarah hadn't known, which meant Webb had deliberately kept her out of the loop. Interesting. Braxton continued his demonstration, tossing around sparring partners like ragdolls. "Size matters. Strength matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. In real combat, the bigger, stronger fighter wins 99 times out of 100. A female soldier near the front shifted uncomfortably. Sarah noticed several others doing the same. "The modern military's gotten soft," Braxton said, pausing to let his words sink in. "We're so worried about feelings and inclusion that we've forgotten what actually matters in combat. Results, victory, survival." "Jesus Christ," Hayes whispered. "He's really going for it today." "He's performing," Sarah said quietly. "For the Pentagon observers, watch his eyes. He keeps checking to see if they're paying attention." Braxton dropped another sparring partner, then stood at parade rest, breathing easily despite the exertion. "Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Sergeant Braxton, what about technique? What about training? And sure, those matter. But let me tell you something about the real world." He gestured to his chest where ribbons indicated 2 tours in Afghanistan. "When you're in a firefight in Kandahar, when it's your life or theirs, you don't win with technique. You win with aggression, power, the will to do whatever it takes." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She'd been in Kandahar. She'd been in places Braxton couldn't even pronounce. And she knew exactly how wrong he was. "Excuse me, Sergeant." The words came out before Sarah fully decided to speak them. The crowd quieted, heads turning to locate the source of the interruption. Braxton's eyes found her, and she saw the calculation happen in real time. Older woman, business clothes, probably some Pentagon bureaucrat. "Ma'am." His tone was professionally neutral, but Sarah heard the dismissiveness underneath. "You mentioned that size and strength determine combat outcomes 99% of the time." "That's correct, ma'am." "What about the other 1%? Braxton smiled, the kind of smile a teacher gives a slow student. "The other 1% is luck, ma'am. Right place, right time. Nothing you can train for." Sarah stepped forward and the crowd parted. She was aware of Hayes trying to grab her arm, of Admiral Ross leaning forward on the command platform, of General Webb's face going pale. "I'd argue that the other 1% is skill," Sarah said calmly. "Technique, the ability to use an opponent's strength against them. With respect, ma'am, that sounds like something someone says when they don't have size or strength." Braxton's smile widened. Several soldiers laughed. "It's a nice theory. Doesn't work in practice." "Your hip throw technique is sloppy," Sarah said. "You're relying entirely on the strength differential between you and your sparring partners. Against an opponent who knows how to counter it, you'd be vulnerable." The laughter died. Braxton's smile froze in place. "Ma'am, I've executed that throw successfully in combat situations, multiple times. Against trained opponents. Against Taliban fighters trying to kill me, ma'am. So untrained opponents. My point stands." The silence was absolute now. 500 soldiers held their collective breath. On the command platform, Admiral Ross had her hand over her mouth, but Sarah could see the smile in her eyes. Braxton's face flushed. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm the undefeated hand-to-hand combat champion of Fort Carson. 47 consecutive wins. I think I know a little bit about fighting." "I'm sure you do, Sergeant. I'm simply suggesting that your technique has room for improvement." "You know what, ma'am?" Braxton's voice dropped to a tone that was just barely respectful enough to avoid insubordination. "Maybe you should head back to whatever office you came from and let the real soldiers handle the combat training. This is warrior work, not really appropriate for someone like you." The words landed like a slap. Sarah felt the collective intake of breath from the crowd. "Someone like me," she repeated softly. "No disrespect intended, ma'am. Just being realistic. This is dangerous work. People get hurt. Liability issues and all that." "Sergeant Braxton," Captain Hayes said urgently, stepping forward. "You should know that—" "It's fine, Captain." Sarah's voice cut through Hayes's warning. She unbuttoned her blazer, shrugged it off, and handed it to Hayes. Underneath, she wore a simple white blouse tucked into her slacks. "Sergeant, I'd like to volunteer as your next demonstration partner." Braxton laughed. Actually laughed. "Ma'am, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but—" "1 round. Standard hand-to-hand combat protocols. Unless you're declining—" The trap was perfect, and Braxton walked right into it. Sarah could see him calculating. He couldn't refuse without looking like a coward, but he also couldn't fight an older woman without looking like a bully. "Ma'am, I really don't think—" "Are you afraid, Sergeant?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Braxton's face went from flush to crimson. "I'm not afraid of anything, ma'am. I just don't want to hurt you. I'll sign whatever liability waiver you need. You worry about yourself." Admiral Ross stood up on the command platform. General Webb looked like he wanted to die. The crowd of 500 soldiers had gone completely silent, everyone understanding they were witnessing something extraordinary. Braxton looked to his commanding officer, Colonel Richard Steele, who stood off to the side with several other senior officers. Steele gave the slightest nod. "All right, ma'am." Braxton stepped onto the mat. "But when you get hurt, remember you insisted on this." Sarah kicked off her heels and stepped onto the mat in her bare feet. She was 5'7", maybe 130, soaking wet. Next to Braxton, she looked like a child. "Sergeant Williams," Braxton called to the referee. "Standard rules." "Standard rules," Williams confirmed, though his voice shook slightly. He looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, are you absolutely sure?" "I'm sure." Williams backed away. "Fighters ready. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, engage." Braxton came in fast, trying to end it quickly and mercifully. A simple grab and throw, nothing fancy. He reached for Sarah's shoulders. She wasn't there. Sarah slipped the grab, like water flowing around a rock, her movement so economical that half the crowd didn't see it happen. Braxton's momentum carried him past her and she let him stumble reset. "Lucky," Braxton muttered. He came again, this time with a combination. High grab, low sweep. It was textbook and would have worked on 99% of opponents. Sarah stepped into the grab instead of away from it, neutralizing his reach advantage. When his leg came for the sweep, she wasn't there. Somehow she'd pivoted behind him, and Braxton felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Fear. He spun, throwing a defensive elbow. Sarah ducked it so smoothly it looked choreographed. The crowd gasped. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "Who is that?" "That's Colonel Brennan," Hayes said loudly enough for nearby soldiers to hear. "Deputy Commander of Operations." The name meant nothing to most of them, but Admiral Ross was smiling openly now. Braxton reset again, his breathing slightly elevated. Not from exertion, from adrenaline. He'd underestimated this woman, and now he was in a fight. "Last chance to quit, ma'am," he said. "You first, Sergeant." Braxton's eyes hardened. If she wanted it rough, he'd give it to her rough. He came in with real aggression, this time a full combat assault. Power strikes, combination attacks, using his size and strength exactly the way he'd been advocating. Sarah met him like a master class in defensive combat. Every attack was deflected, redirected, or simply avoided. She didn't try to match his power. She used it. When he pushed, she pulled. When he pulled, she pushed. It was like watching a physicist demonstrate momentum and leverage. "My God," General Webb whispered from the command platform. "She's playing with him." 30 seconds in, Braxton was breathing hard. Frustration replaced his confidence. He'd thrown everything in his arsenal at this woman, and he hadn't landed a single clean strike. "Stand still," he growled. "Make me." Braxton roared and launched his signature move, the one that had never failed him. The hammer drop. A high grab into a brutal overhead throw. It required perfect timing and overwhelming strength. He'd used it to end championships. He reached for Sarah's collar, got a grip, began the lift. And then the world went sideways. Later, combat analysts would slow down the video and explain what happened. Sarah had grabbed Braxton's wrist with both hands, dropped her weight, twisted her hips, and used a technique called the broken compass. It was a classified Navy SEAL close-quarters combat move taught only to special operations personnel. What the 500 soldiers saw was this. Braxton reached for Sarah. There was a blur of motion. And then Braxton was airborne, upside down, his shoulder joint. Extending in a way shoulders were not designed to extend. He hit the mat with a sound like a side of beef dropping onto concrete. His shoulder made a separate, distinct, popping noise, and then he screamed. The sound cut through the morning air like a siren. Braxton lay on the mat, clutching his right shoulder, his face white with pain and shock. "Medic!" Williams yelled, sprinting forward. "We need a medic now!" Sarah stepped back, her breathing, even her expression, calm. She walked to where Hayes stood, holding her blazer and shoes. "Ma'am?" Hayes whispered. "That was unnecessary." Sarah finished. She pulled on her blazer. "Get me General Webb. We need to talk before this becomes an incident." "Ma'am, I think it's already an incident." On the mat, medics surrounded Braxton. His screaming had subsided to agonized groaning. The crowd of 500 soldiers stood in absolute silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Admiral Ross descended from the command platform, her face carefully neutral. She stopped in front of Sarah. "Colonel Brennan." "Admiral Ross." That was quite a demonstration. "The sergeant invited me to participate, ma'am. I obliged." Ross's mouth twitched. "Indeed. Walk with me, Colonel." They moved away from the crowd toward the command tent. Behind them, Sarah heard the whispers starting. Heard someone say, "Did you see that?" Heard someone else reply, "I got it on video. Holy shit, I got the whole thing." "You know this is going to explode," Ross said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Webb's going to be furious. Steele will demand an investigation." "Yes, ma'am." "Was it worth it?" Sarah stopped walking. She looked back at the demonstration area where medics were carefully loading Braxton onto a stretcher. She saw the female soldiers whispering excitedly to each other. saw male soldiers looking at her with new eyes. "Ask me again in a week, Admiral." Ross nodded slowly. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" Combat Integration Assessment. You're evaluating Fort Carson's readiness for the new gender integration protocols. We were expecting resistance. We weren't expecting that. Neither was Sergeant Braxton, apparently. "Colonel Brennan, I need to ask you a direct question. Did you know what was going to happen this morning?" Sarah met Ross's eyes. "I knew Fort Carson had cultural issues. I knew Braxton had a reputation for being harsh on female soldiers. I knew General Webb transferred me here to finish out my career quietly, because I was too old and too female to be useful anywhere else. Did I know Braxton would publicly disrespect me in front of 500 troops and Pentagon observers? No, ma'am, but I'm not surprised." "Your personnel file says you spent 18 years as a Navy SEAL." "Yes, ma'am." "It says you hold the Navy Cross for actions in Yemen." "Yes, ma'am." "It says you were part of the cadre that trained SEAL Team 6 instructors." "Yes, ma'am." "It doesn't say anything about the broken compass technique." Sarah smiled thinly. "That's because the broken compass technique doesn't officially exist, Admiral." Ross nodded. "General Webb is heading this way. He looks upset. He generally does when I'm involved." General Marcus Webb was indeed upset. He approached at a speed just barely short of running his face purple. "Colonel Brennan, my office, now." "General, if I might," Ross began. "With respect, Admiral, this is an internal Fort Carson matter. I'll handle it." "Actually, General, since I'm here conducting a Pentagon assessment of your base's combat readiness and cultural integration, and since this incident directly pertains to my evaluation, I'll be joining you." Webb's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then he turned on his heel and stalked toward the command building. Sarah and Ross followed. Behind them, the crowd of 500 soldiers was already pulling out phones, already texting and posting and sharing. The video of Sarah's takedown was uploaded before they even reached the building. Within an hour, it would have 10,000 views. Within 6 hours, 2 million. By the end of the day, it would be the most watched military video on the internet. But Sarah didn't know that yet. Right now, she followed General Webb into his office and prepared for the real fight. Webb slammed his office door hard enough to rattle the photos on his wall. "What the hell was that, Colonel?" "A training demonstration, sir." "Don't play games with me. You assaulted a sergeant in front of 500 troops. He challenged me to a sanctioned combat exercise. I accepted. He lost. He's injured, dislocated shoulder, possible rotator cuff damage. He should have tapped out sooner." Webb's face went from purple to crimson. "You're finished, Brennan. I'm recommending court-martial. Assault on an enlisted soldier. Conduct unbecoming. I'll have your star." "Actually, General, you won't." Admiral Ross spoke from where she stood by the window. Her voice was calm, but it carried absolute authority. "Excuse me, Admiral." Webb turned. "I said you won't be court-martialing Colonel Brennan. In fact, I'm recommending her for commendation." "What?" "I witnessed the entire event. Sergeant Braxton publicly challenged a superior officer. He made disparaging comments about her age and gender. He created a hostile environment in front of Pentagon observers. Colonel Brennan responded with appropriate and proportional force in a controlled training environment. She did exactly what she should have done. She hospitalized one of my best soldiers. She defended herself and the dignity of her position when directly challenged. If anything, Braxton should face disciplinary action for insubordination." Webb looked between them, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "This is insane. She's 52 years old. She had no business being on that mat. So age should disqualify her from defending herself." Ross raised an eyebrow. "Interesting position, General. I'll make sure to include that in my assessment. I'm sure Congress will find it fascinating." "That's not what I..." "General Webb, let me be very clear. I came to Fort Carson to assess combat readiness and integration protocols. What I witnessed this morning was a textbook example of a hostile work environment, gender discrimination, and institutional bias. The only bright spot was Colonel Brennan's response. If you attempt to punish her for defending herself, I will personally ensure that this incident becomes a case study in exactly what's wrong with military culture. The office fell silent. Sarah stood at attention, her face neutral, while Webb processed the trap he'd walked into. Finally, Webb spoke, his voice tight. "What do you suggest, Admiral?" "I suggest we conduct a thorough investigation, interview witnesses, review the video, examine the institutional culture that led to this incident. And I suggest Colonel Brennan be placed on administrative leave pending that investigation." "Agreed," Webb said quickly. "With full pay and benefits, of course, and no prejudicial statements to the media." Webb nodded curtly. "Colonel Brennan, do you have anything to add?" Ross asked. Sarah had plenty to add. She wanted to talk about the 17 female soldiers who'd filed informal complaints about hostile training environments at Fort Carson. She wanted to discuss the promotion rates for women versus men under General Webb's command. She wanted to mention the late-night conversation she'd had with Admiral Ross 3 months ago when Ross had asked her to accept this assignment, specifically to document discrimination. Instead, she said, "No, ma'am. I trust the investigation will be thorough and fair." "Dismissed, Colonel." Sarah saluted and left. In the hallway outside Webb's office, Captain Hayes was waiting. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Hayes held up her phone. The video was already everywhere. Sarah watched herself take down Braxton in perfect high definition. The angle was good, the audio clear. You could hear every word Braxton had said, every dismissive comment, every condescending phrase. And you could see Sarah's face. Calm, composed, deadly. "It's viral, ma'am. 6 million views already. The comments are, well, they're interesting." Sarah scrolled through them. "Badass. That's what you get for underestimating old ladies. Somebody get that sergeant some ice for his ego. This is what peak performance looks like." "Ma'am," Hayes said quietly, "Colonel Steele is gathering witness statements. He's trying to build a case that you attacked Braxton unprovoked." "Of course he is. Why would he do that? You were clearly defending yourself." Sarah looked at Hayes, considering how much to say. "Captain, how many women are in combat roles at Fort Carson?" "Maybe 20. "How many were there when you arrived 2 years ago?" Hayes frowned. "Maybe 15. "And how many should there be based on the qualified personnel available?" "I don't know, ma'am. Maybe 50, 60. 73, Sarah said. "I counted. 73 women who are qualified for combat roles but are currently assigned to administrative positions or support functions. Why? That's exactly what Admiral Ross is here to find out." Hayes's eyes widened. "You think Colonel Steele is blocking them deliberately?" "I think Fort Carson has a culture problem. I think certain officers benefit from maintaining that problem. And I think what happened this morning is going to force everyone to choose which side they're on." "Ma'am, if they're building a case against you, let them. I have my own case to build." Sarah's phone buzzed. "Unknown number," she answered. "Colonel Brennan, this is Lieutenant Kara Foster. I'm stationed at Fort Carson. I saw what happened this morning." "Yes, Lieutenant. I need to talk to you about Sergeant Braxton, about Colonel Steele, about things that have been happening here." The young woman's voice shook. "Things I should have reported but was too scared to." "Where are you, Lieutenant?" "The library, private study room 3B. "Please, ma'am, I have recordings, emails, evidence." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. She ended the call and looked at Hayes. "Come with me, Jennifer, and bring your phone. Set it to record." "Ma'am, what's going on? Either we're walking into a trap or we're about to crack this base wide open." They reached the library in 8 minutes. Lieutenant Foster was exactly what Sarah expected, young, scared, and carrying a folder thick enough to be a weapon. "Ma'am, I don't know who else to tell. Everyone says you can't be intimidated, that you don't play politics." Foster's hands shook as she opened the folder. "I've been documenting everything for 6 months. Every comment, every denied opportunity, every time Colonel Steele told us we weren't combat material." Sarah took the folder. Inside were printouts of emails, screenshots of text messages, handwritten notes with dates and times. "This email here, Foster pointed. That's Colonel Steele telling Captain Martinez that women shouldn't be assigned to combat training rotations because it disrupts unit cohesion. And this one, she flipped pages, is him telling Sergeant Braxton to make an example of any woman who got too confident in training exercises. Sarah felt ice water flow through her veins. When did you receive this information? I didn't receive it. I was CC'd by accident on some of these emails. The others, I have a friend in the admin office who's been documenting everything. She's terrified to come forward, but she gave me copies. Hayes was reading over Sarah's shoulder. Ma'am, this is explosive. This is evidence of systematic discrimination, Sarah corrected. Lieutenant, I need to ask you a direct question. Are you prepared to testify formally, to put your name on official statements? Foster's face went pale. Colonel Steele will destroy my career. Maybe. Or maybe we destroy his first. I have a family, ma'am. A daughter. I understand. Sarah closed the folder. Give me 24 hours. Don't talk to anyone about this. Not your friend, not your family, no one. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. Good. I'll contact you tomorrow. In the meantime, make copies of everything. Store them somewhere safe, off base if possible. Foster nodded and fled. Sarah and Hayes stood in the empty study room, the folder sitting between them like a bomb. This is it, Hayes whispered. This is how we take Steele down. Maybe, Sarah said. Or this is how Steele buries us all. Her phone rang again. Admiral Ross. Colonel, where are you? The base library, ma'am. You need to come back to headquarters immediately. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Sergeant Braxton just gave a statement to Colonel Steele. He's claiming you assaulted him without provocation. Says you threatened him beforehand. Says you told him you were going to make an example of him. Sarah's blood ran cold. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. Unfortunately, Steele has 3 witnesses who corroborate Braxton's version of events. Let me guess. 3 soldiers from Steele's unit. How did you know? Because I've seen this play before, Admiral. The question is, what do we do about it? Ross was quiet for a moment. Get back here. We're going to war, Colonel. Time to choose your weapons. Sarah ended the call. She looked at Hayes at the folder of evidence at the path she was about to walk down. Ma'am, Hayes asked quietly, what are we going to do? Sarah thought about her father, Captain William Morgan, killed in Afghanistan. She thought about the 18 years she'd spent as a SEAL fighting in places most people couldn't find on a map. She thought about being forced into retirement at 48 because she was too old for active combat operations. She thought about every woman who'd ever been told she didn't belong. Every person who'd ever been underestimated because of their age, their gender, their appearance. And she thought about 500 soldiers watching her take down Tyler Braxton. 500 witnesses to what happened when you pushed back. We're going to fight, Sarah said, and we're going to win. They walked out of the library into the bright Colorado morning. The video had 15 million views now. The internet was exploding, and somewhere in Fort Carson, Colonel Richard Steele was preparing his attack. Sarah smiled grimly. Let him come. She'd been preparing for this fight her entire life. The walk back to headquarters felt like walking toward execution. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from former SEAL teammates, from officers she'd served with in Yemen, from people she hadn't heard from in years. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone had an opinion. Hayes walked beside her, silent but alert. The base felt different now. Soldiers stopped and stared as they passed. Some nodded respectfully. Others looked away quickly, like Sarah was contagious. Ma'am, we're being followed, Hayes murmured. Sarah had noticed. 2 MPs keeping a discreet distance. They're not subtle about it. Do you think Webb ordered surveillance? Webb or Steele? Does it matter? They reached headquarters just as Colonel Richard Steele emerged from the building, flanked by 3 officers Sarah recognized from the morning demonstration. All male, all looking grim. Colonel Brennan, Steele's voice carried across the parking lot. We need to talk. I'm due to meet with Admiral Ross, Colonel. This won't take long. Steele approached his officers, forming a loose semicircle, not threatening exactly, just present. I've been gathering statements about this morning's incident. Incident? Sarah kept her voice neutral. Interesting word choice. What would you call it? A training exercise. Sergeant Braxton challenged me. I accepted. That's not what the witnesses say. Steele pulled out a tablet, swiped through screens. According to 3 separate statements, you threatened Sergeant Braxton before the match. Told him you were going to teach him a lesson about respecting his superiors. Sarah felt Hayes tense beside her. That's false. 3 witnesses, Colonel. 3 credible soldiers who all heard the same thing. Let me guess. All 3 from your unit. Steele's smile was cold. They're reliable soldiers with impeccable records. Unlike some people, they understand chain of command and appropriate conduct. Colonel Steele, I have 500 witnesses who saw exactly what happened. You have 500 people who saw you assault a sergeant half your age. The question is whether it was justified or whether you went onto that mat looking for blood. Are you accusing me of something specific, sir? I'm saying the evidence suggests you deliberately provoked and then injured Sergeant Braxton. I'm saying this looks like an abuse of rank and authority. Hayes spoke up, her voice sharp. Sir, there's video, multiple angles. It clearly shows. Video can be edited, Captain. Perspective can be manipulated. What matters is establishing intent. Did Colonel Brennan act in self-defense, or did she attack a subordinate? Sarah studied Steele's face. He wasn't angry. He was calculated. This was a prepared strategy executed with precision. Admiral Ross is expecting me, Sarah said. Unless you're formally charging me with something. Steele stepped closer, his voice dropping. You made a mistake coming to Fort Carson, Brennan. You should have stayed behind your Pentagon desk where you belonged. You're too old for this game. Apparently not too old to take down your champion. Steele's mask slipped for just a second. Rage flashed in his eyes before the professional smile returned. Enjoy your meeting with the Admiral. I'm sure it will be very educational. He walked away, his officers following. Sarah waited until they were out of earshot. He's building a narrative, Hayes said. Unreliable female officer, past her prime, loses control and injures a young soldier. I know. Ma'am, we need to fight this. We need to get ahead of the story. We will, but first, I need to know how deep this goes. Admiral Ross was waiting in General Webb's conference room, surrounded by tablets and printouts. She looked up as Sarah entered. Close the door. Sarah did. Hayes moved to follow, but Ross shook her head. Just Colonel Brennan, Captain. Wait outside. Hayes hesitated, then obeyed. The door clicked shut. Sit down, Sarah. The use of her first name was deliberate. Sarah sat. The video has 23 million views, Ross said without preamble. It's trending on every social media platform. CNN wants interviews. Fox News wants interviews. The Pentagon's press office is being bombarded. The Secretary of Defense has personally called me twice in the last hour. What does he want? Damage control. The official line is that this was an unfortunate training accident. You and Braxton were engaged in a sanctioned exercise that got out of hand. Everyone regrets the outcome. Moving forward, we're reviewing protocols to prevent similar incidents. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That's the story, training accident. That's the story the Pentagon wants. Clean, simple, no discrimination angle, no institutional problems. Just 2 soldiers who got a little too intense during training. That's a lie. That's politics. Ross leaned back. Sarah, you need to understand what you've done. That video is being used by every advocacy group in the country. Women in combat, age discrimination, military culture. You're a symbol now, whether you want to be or not. I didn't ask to be a symbol. No one ever does, but here we are. Ross paused. I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Did you know what was going to happen this morning? Sarah met her eyes. I knew Braxton had a reputation. I knew Fort Carson had cultural issues. I knew that's why you sent me here, to document problems, to be a target. Did you expect him to challenge you physically? No, but I was prepared for it. Ross nodded slowly. The broken compass technique. That's not standard Army training. No. In fact, it's a classified SEAL close-quarters combat move, one that can cause serious injury if applied improperly. Applied properly, it neutralizes a threat without permanent damage. Braxton's shoulder will heal completely in 6 to 8 weeks. Did you intend to injure him? The question hung between them. Sarah chose her words carefully. I intended to defend myself. I intended to respond proportionally to a physical challenge from an aggressive opponent. I intended to demonstrate that age and gender don't automatically determine combat outcomes. Did you intend to make it look easy? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That was a bonus. Ross laughed short and sharp. Then her face went serious again. Colonel Steele is pushing for a court-martial. He has witness statements claiming you threatened Braxton before the fight. I did no such thing. I know. I was there. I heard everything. But Steele has 3 soldiers willing to testify otherwise. Then they're lying. Obviously. The question is why. Ross pulled out her tablet, opened a file. I've been doing some digging. Colonel Richard Steele, 28 years of service, solid record, 3 combat tours, decorated veteran, set to be promoted to Brigadier General in the next promotion cycle. And he's been very vocal about his opposition to women in combat roles, called it social engineering in internal communications, fought against integration protocols. But he's been careful, nothing overtly discriminatory, nothing that would derail his promotion. Until now. Ross leaned forward. Sarah, I think Steele orchestrated this morning. I think he knew you'd observe the demonstration. I think Braxton was primed to provoke you. To what end? To discredit you. To create a situation where a female officer loses control and attacks a young male soldier. It's the perfect narrative to argue against women in leadership positions. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Except I didn't lose control. I won. You didn't just win. You dominated. On camera. In front of 500 witnesses and Pentagon observers. You destroyed his narrative. So now he's trying to rewrite it. Exactly. If he can make you look unstable, dangerous, unable to control your emotions, he salvages the situation. Maybe even strengthens his case against integration. Sarah stood paced to the window. Outside, Fort Carson continued its daily routine. Soldiers training, vehicles moving, business as usual. Except nothing was usual anymore. What do you need from me, Admiral? I need you to trust me. I need you to let me handle the Pentagon politics. And I need you to give me ammunition. What kind of ammunition? Ross pulled out another file thicker than the first. I need proof that Fort Carson has a systemic discrimination problem. I need documentation. I need witnesses willing to testify. I need evidence that this isn't about you and Braxton. It's about an institutional culture that's hostile to women. Sarah thought about Lieutenant Foster, about the folder full of emails and text messages, about 73 qualified women stuck in administrative roles. I might have something. Ross's eyes sharpened. How good? Emails from Steele discussing ways to exclude women from combat training. Text messages coaching male soldiers on how to intimidate female personnel. Documentation of qualified women being systematically denied opportunities. Jesus Christ, Ross breathed out slowly. Where did you get this? A lieutenant came to me this afternoon. She's been documenting everything for months. Is she willing to testify? She's scared. Steele would destroy her career. Not if we destroy his first. Ross stood. I need to see this evidence. Tonight. Can you arrange that? I'll try. Don't try. Do it. Because tomorrow morning Steele is filing formal charges against you. Once that happens, everything gets locked down in legal proceedings. We need to act fast. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Colonel Brennan, this is Sergeant Braxton. We need to talk. Alone. I'm at the hospital. Room 304. Please come. Sarah showed Ross the message. The Admiral frowned. It's a trap. Maybe. Or maybe he's having second thoughts about Steele's story. You can't go alone. I have to. If he's willing to tell the truth, I need to hear it without witnesses intimidating him. Ross studied her face. You know this could end your career. My career was over the day I turned 50 and got reassigned from SEAL operations to a Pentagon desk. This is just the dramatic ending. Some endings are better than others. Then let's make sure this one counts. The hospital was 10 minutes away. Sarah drove herself, ignoring Hayes's protests. The young captain meant well, but this conversation needed to happen without an audience. Braxton's room was on the 3rd floor in the orthopedic wing. 2 MPs stood outside his door. "Colonel Brennan," the taller one said, "Sergeant Braxton is under medical observation. No visitors without authorization." He invited me. "We have orders from Colonel Steele. No one sees the sergeant without his explicit approval. Check with Braxton. Ask him if he wants to see me." The MP hesitated, then spoke into his radio. A moment later, he nodded. "You have 10 minutes. We'll be right outside." The door opened. Braxton lay in the hospital bed, his right arm in a complex sling that immobilized his shoulder. His face was pale, whether from pain or shame, Sarah couldn't tell. "Colonel?" His voice was hoarse. "Sergeant, how's the shoulder?" "Dislocated. Rotator cuff strain. They said 6 to 8 weeks before I can return to duty." Sarah pulled up a chair. "Why did you want to see me?" Braxton stared at the ceiling. "I need to tell you something, before this gets any worse." "I'm listening." "Colonel Steele came to see me, right after they brought me here, before the doctors had even finished the x-rays." "What did he say?" "He said this was my chance to be a hero, to take down an officer who'd abused her authority. He said you'd been looking for an excuse to attack me, that you'd threatened me before the match." "None of that is true." "I know." Braxton finally looked at her. "I was there. I heard what you said. You didn't threaten me. You called out my technique, and I got pissed. So why did you sign a statement saying otherwise?" Braxton's jaw tightened. "Because Steele promised me a promotion. Because he said this was about protecting the military from political correctness. Because he made it sound like I was doing the right thing. And now I'm lying in a hospital bed realizing I got my ass kicked by a woman old enough to be my mother, and instead of learning from it, I'm helping destroy her career." He laughed bitterly. "My father was a Marine, served in Desert Storm. He used to say the worst thing a soldier could do was betray the truth. Said integrity was the only thing that mattered when everything else was gone." Sarah waited. She'd interrogated enough people to know when someone was ready to break. "Those 3 witnesses Steele found," Braxton continued. "They're all from his unit. All guys who were passed over for promotion last cycle. All guys who blame affirmative action and women in the military for their problems. Did Steele coach them? Worse. He wrote their statements for them. I saw the drafts in his office yesterday, before the demonstration even happened." Ice water through Sarah's veins. "He planned this. Before I ever stepped on that mat. He's been planning it for weeks, since he heard about the Pentagon assessment. He knew Admiral Ross was coming. He knew you were here to document problems. He wanted to create a situation where you'd look like the problem instead of him." "Why are you telling me this?" Braxton met her eyes. "Because I watched that video 20 times, 30. I watched you move. Watched you counter every attack I threw at you. You know what I saw? What? A master. Someone who's forgotten more about combat than I'll ever learn. And I realized I'd been played. Steele used my ego, my prejudices, my stupidity. He turned me into a weapon to destroy someone who's probably saved more lives and served with more honor than I can imagine. It took courage to realize that. It took getting humiliated in front of 500 people." He shifted, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "I'm going to recant my statement. Tell the truth about what Steele did. It'll probably end my career, but I don't want to be the guy who helped destroy yours because I was too proud to admit a woman beat me fair and square." Sarah stood. She extended her hand. Braxton looked at it, then shook it awkwardly with his left hand. "Thank you, Sergeant. Don't thank me yet. Steele's got connections. Pentagon buddies. This isn't over. It never is." Sarah left the hospital feeling the first stirrings of hope. Braxton's testimony could change everything. Combined with Lieutenant Foster's documentation, they might actually have a case. Her phone rang. Hayes. Ma'am, where are you? On my way back to base. What's wrong? Everything's wrong. General Webb just held a press conference. He announced you're being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into your conduct. He said the Army takes allegations of assault seriously and that justice will be served regardless of rank. He actually used the word assault. Multiple times. Ma'am, it's bad. CNN is running with it. The story's shifting from badass female colonel takes down sexist sergeant to troubled officer attacks young soldier. Steele's moving faster than I expected. There's more. Lieutenant Foster just called me. She's panicking. Says her commander called her in for questioning. Asked her if she'd had any contact with you today. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Did she tell them about the documentation? No, but she's scared. Says she can't testify. Says her career isn't worth it. Damn it. Ma'am, what do we do? Sarah thought fast. Without Foster's testimony, they had no proof of systematic discrimination. Without Braxton's recantation, she had no defense against Steele's false narrative. Everything was falling apart. Call Admiral Ross. Tell her I need an emergency meeting, tonight, off base, somewhere private. Where? There's a diner called Murphy's 20 miles north on Highway 25. Tell her 9 p.m. Come alone. Ma'am, is that wise? Wisdom went out the window when I stepped on that combat mat. Right now we're in survival mode. Sarah ended the call and drove her mind racing. Steele was playing a masterful game. Turn public opinion, intimidate witnesses, control the narrative. Classic psychological warfare. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated her. Again. Murphy's Diner was exactly what it looked like: old-school American comfort food, worn vinyl booths, coffee that could strip paint. Sarah arrived early, took a corner booth with clear sightlines to the entrance. Admiral Ross arrived precisely at 9, dressed in civilian clothes. She slid into the booth across from Sarah. This better be good. I had to dodge 3 reporters on my way out of the base. Braxton wants to recant his statement. He's willing to testify that Steele coached witnesses and fabricated evidence. Ross's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. That changes everything. It would. Except Lieutenant Foster is backing out. Without her documentation of systematic discrimination, this stays a he said, she said situation. Can we compel her testimony? We could, but terrified witnesses make terrible witnesses. She'd fall apart under cross-examination. Ross drummed her fingers on the table. What about the other women? The 73 qualified soldiers stuck in administrative roles. Any of them willing to come forward? I don't know. I haven't had time to reach out. Then make time. We need multiple voices. One scared lieutenant isn't enough, but 10 women, 20. That's a pattern. Steele will claim they're following my lead. Disgruntled soldiers backing up their sympathetic commander. Let him. We'll bury him in testimony. Ross leaned forward. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something off the record. The Pentagon wants this to go away quietly. They want you to take a reprimand, maybe early retirement. They want Braxton to get a medical discharge. They want everyone to move on and forget this happened. And what do you want? I want to burn Steele's career to the ground. I want to expose every officer who's been blocking women from combat roles. I want to use this incident to force real institutional change. She paused. But I can't do it without you. And I can't do it if you're not willing to sacrifice everything. What are you asking me, Admiral? I'm asking if you're willing to go to war. Real war. Not the kind with guns and explosives. The kind with lawyers and politicians and media firestorms. The kind where your entire life gets dissected on cable news. Where every mistake you've ever made gets weaponized against you. Sarah thought about her father. About 18 years as a SEAL. About being pushed aside at 48 because she was too old. About every woman who'd been told she didn't belong. I'm willing. Then here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to request a formal court-martial instead of an administrative hearing. Sarah blinked. That's insane. A court-martial puts everything on public record. Exactly. Steele wants to bury this in bureaucracy. We're going to drag it into the sunlight, every witness, every piece of evidence, every email and text message, all of it public. He'll fight that. Of course he will. And when he does, we'll make it look like he's hiding something, because he is. Sarah felt a smile spreading across her face. You're not trying to defend me. You're using me as bait. I'm giving you a choice. Take the quiet retirement or become the face of a movement. It's your call. Sarah thought for maybe 3 seconds. Let's burn it all down. Ross pulled out her tablet. Then we need to move fast. I need you to contact every woman on this base who's been discriminated against. Every denied promotion. Every inappropriate comment. Every time someone said they didn't belong. I need statements by tomorrow night. That's impossible. You took down Fort Carson's hand-to-hand combat champion in 2 minutes. This should be easy. This is different. No, it's not. It's the same thing. Someone powerful underestimating you. Someone assuming you'll back down. Ross's eyes were hard. Don't back down, Sarah. They talked for another hour planning strategy. By the time Sarah left Murphy's, she had a mission list longer than most combat operations. She drove back to base with her phone already dialing. First call, Captain Hayes. Jennifer, I need you to do something that might end both our careers. I'm listening. I need you to contact every female officer and NCO on Fort Carson. Tonight. Tell them I'm requesting formal statements about discrimination, harassment, or hostile work environments. Tell them it's voluntary but urgent. Tell them this is their chance to be heard. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, if I do this, Colonel Steele will crucify me. I know, I'm not ordering you, I'm asking. Then my answer is yes. When do you need the statements? Tomorrow night. Jesus. Okay, I'll start making calls. Second call. Former SEAL teammate Commander Jack Morrison, now stationed at the Pentagon. Jack, it's Sarah, I need a favor. I saw the video. Braxton had it coming. I need you to pull Steele's service record. Everything. Especially his efficiency reports from the last 5 years. I need to know who he's connected to and who might protect him. That's... Sarah, that's a lot to ask. You owe me from Kandahar. Long pause. Yeah, I do. I'll see what I can find. Third call, Lieutenant Foster. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice shaking. Colonel Brennan, I can't help you. My commander said, I know what your commander said. I know you're scared, but I need you to listen to me. I can't testify. I'll lose everything. If you don't testify, nothing changes. Steele wins. Women like you keep getting pushed aside. How many more years are you willing to stay silent? That's not fair. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair, but it's reality. Sarah softened her voice. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to tell the truth, in writing. Just put down what happened, what you witnessed, what you documented. Let the evidence speak. Foster was crying. I'm so scared. I know, me too. You're scared you took down Tyler Braxton like he was nothing. Physical courage is easy. This kind of courage, this is harder. This is standing up when everyone's telling you to sit down. This is risking everything for something bigger than yourself. What if I lose my career? What if you save someone else's? Foster breathed shakily into the phone. Give me until midnight. I'll send you everything I have. Thank you. Colonel, when this is over, one way or another, I want you to know you're the reason I stayed in the military. After everything that happened my first year, I almost quit. Then I heard about you, about a female SEAL who refused to quit no matter what. You're the reason I'm still here. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Then let's make sure we're both still here when this is done. She made 7 more calls. 3 former subordinates now stationed elsewhere. 2 officers who'd transferred from Fort Carson citing cultural issues. 2 civilian contacts who worked for military advocacy groups. By the time she got back to her quarters, it was past midnight, and her voice was hoarse. Her email inbox had 43 new messages, statements, stories, documentation. Hayes appeared at her door at 0100, carrying a thumb drive and looking exhausted. 32 statements, she said, ranging from inappropriate comments to outright harassment. 5 women describe explicit instructions from Steele to avoid combat training assignments. 12 describe being passed over for promotions they were qualified for. 23 describe a hostile culture that actively discourages women from pursuing combat roles. Sarah took the thumb drive like it was made of gold. Jennifer, you just gave us ammunition. I gave us truth. Whether it's enough is up to other people. It's enough. Hayes turned to leave, then stopped. Ma'am, thank you for not ordering me to do this. Thank you for giving me the choice. That's what this whole thing is about, isn't it, choice? The right to choose your path without someone deciding you're not good enough based on what you look like or how old you are. After Hayes left, Sarah sat at her desk and read every statement. Each one was a small tragedy. A woman denied opportunity. A soldier told she didn't measure up. A life redirected away from its chosen path. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking and Sarah had tears streaming down her face. These weren't just statements. They were battle scars. And tomorrow, they were going to war. Sarah didn't sleep. She spent the remaining hours before dawn organizing statements, cross-referencing dates, building a timeline of systematic discrimination that spanned 3 years. By the time her alarm went off at 0500, she had a case file that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. Her phone rang at 0515. Admiral Ross. Conference room C, 20 minutes. Bring everything. The line went dead. Sarah dressed quickly, military precision taking over. Uniform pressed and perfect. Hair regulation tight. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she barely recognized. Not the SEAL operator who'd run missions in Yemen. Not the desk colonel quietly finishing out her career. Someone new. Someone dangerous. Hayes was waiting outside her quarters with coffee and a grim expression. Steele filed the court-martial paperwork an hour ago. It's official. You're being charged with assault conduct, unbecoming, and abuse of authority. Good. Hayes blinked. Good. He took the bait. Now he's locked into a public trial. Everything comes out. Or everything gets buried by his Pentagon connections. That's why we move fast. They reached conference room C to find Admiral Ross already there, along with 2 people Sarah didn't recognize. A woman in her 40s wearing civilian business attire and a younger man taking notes on a tablet. Colonel Brennan, this is Rebecca Martinez from the Judge Advocate General's office. She'll be your defense counsel. And this is Lieutenant Commander David Park, her assistant. Martinez extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp. I've reviewed the preliminary charges. They're bullshit, but they're well-constructed bullshit. Steele has 3 witnesses, video evidence of you putting a sergeant in the hospital, and a compelling narrative about an unstable female officer who couldn't handle criticism. Nice to meet you too, Sarah said dryly. I don't do pep talks, Colonel. I do facts. And the facts are that without extraordinary evidence, you're going to lose this court-martial. Your career ends. Steele gets promoted. Women in combat roles take a massive public relations hit. Everyone loses except the people who want to turn back the clock on integration. What do you need? Martinez smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Everything you've got. And I mean everything. Documentation, witnesses, smoking guns. I need to prove this isn't about you and Braxton. It's about institutional culture. We need to put Fort Carson on trial, not you. Sarah handed over the thumb drive. 32 statements from female personnel documenting harassment and discrimination. Lieutenant Foster's evidence file showing systematic exclusion of qualified women from combat roles. Emails from Colonel Steele explicitly discussing ways to undermine integration protocols. Martinez plugged in the thumb drive. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. Holy shit. That's what I said, Hayes murmured. Colonel, this is enough to end multiple careers. Steele's especially. Martinez looked up. But we have a problem. Chain of custody. How did you obtain this evidence? Lieutenant Foster provided it voluntarily. After you solicited it. While under investigation yourself. Defense counsel will argue you coerced testimony from subordinates to save your own career. Sarah felt her stomach sink. So it's inadmissible. Not inadmissible, just vulnerable. We need independent corroboration. Martinez turned to Ross. Admiral, you witnessed the original incident. Your testimony carries weight. But we need more. We need someone with unimpeachable credibility to validate these claims. Ross nodded slowly. I might know someone. General Patricia Hodges retired last year. Former head of Army personnel. She tried to investigate Fort Carson's integration record 2 years ago, but got stonewalled. If she testifies, get her, Martinez said flatly. Whatever it takes. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text from Commander Morrison at the Pentagon. Got Steele's records. You need to see this. Sending encrypted file now. Sarah opened the file on her phone, then held it out for Martinez to see. The lawyer's expression went from interest to shock. Is this accurate? Jack Morrison is the most thorough intelligence officer I know. If he sent it, it's accurate. Martinez looked at Admiral Ross. Did you know about this? Know about what? Ross leaned over to look. The file showed Colonel Richard Steele's efficiency reports from the past 5 years. On the surface, everything looked exemplary, outstanding ratings, strong recommendations, clear promotion trajectory. But Morrison had included something else. A separate analysis showing statistical anomalies in how Steele rated his personnel. Male soldiers under his command had a 92% promotion rate. Female soldiers had a 23% promotion rate. That's not just discrimination, Ross breathed. That's systematic career sabotage. It gets better, Sarah said, scrolling down. Look at the comparison data. Other units at Fort Carson average 68% promotion rates for women. Only Steele's units consistently underperform. Martinez was already making notes. This is statistical proof of bias. Combined with the testimony, this is devastating. There's more. Sarah scrolled to the next section. Morrison found classified communications between Steele and Senator Harold Grimes. They've been coordinating opposition to the new integration protocols. Grimes has been feeding Steele talking points. Steele has been providing Grimes with anecdotal evidence of why integration is failing. That's a political conspiracy, Park said quietly. That goes way beyond Fort Carson. Ross stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. This just became a Pentagon-level issue. She left the room. Martinez continued reading through the evidence, her expression growing grimmer. Colonel Brennan, I need you to understand something. If we pursue this aggressively, we're not just defending you. We're attacking a sitting senator, a decorated colonel, and potentially others connected to them. This becomes political. Messy. People get hurt. People are already hurt, Sarah said quietly. 32 women who came forward. 73 more who were denied opportunities. How many others who just quietly left the military rather than fight the system? Agreed. But I need you clear-eyed about this. Steele will fight back. Hard. They'll dig into your past. Every mission. Every relationship. Every mistake. Your SEAL record will be scrutinized. Your early retirement will be questioned. They'll try to paint you as bitter, washed up, looking for relevance. Let them try. They'll succeed at some of it. Nobody's record is perfect. Sarah met Martinez's eyes. I'm 52 years old. I've spent 28 years in the military, 18 of those as a SEAL. I've been shot at, blown up, and more times than I can count. Told I wasn't good enough because of my gender. If they want to dig into my past, they'll find someone who refused to quit. Someone who earned every single achievement through blood and skill. Let them try to discredit that. Martinez smiled this time with genuine warmth. Good, because that's exactly the opening statement I'm going to use. Hayes's phone rang. She answered, listened, then went pale. Ma'am, Sergeant Braxton just recanted his recantation. The room went silent. Explain, Martinez said sharply. He called his commanding officer this morning and said he made a mistake yesterday. Said he was on pain medication and confused. Said his original statement about Colonel Brennan threatening him was accurate. He's refusing to change his testimony. Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. Steele got to him. Apparently, Braxton's family received threatening phone calls last night. anonymous, telling them to keep quiet if they knew what was good for them. "That's witness intimidation," Martinez said. "That's a federal crime." "Prove it," Hayes replied. The calls were from burner phones, untraceable. Braxton's scared. His family's scared. He's not going to testify against Steele now. Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, Fort Carson continued its morning routine. Soldiers running PT, vehicles moving, the machine grinding forward. "We're back to square one," she said quietly. "Without Braxton's testimony about Steele coaching witnesses, we can't prove the charges against me are fabricated." "Not entirely," Martinez said. "We still have the statistical evidence, the statements from female personnel, Foster's documentation. That's enough to create reasonable doubt about your guilt." "Reasonable doubt isn't enough. I don't want to barely survive this. I want to win." Martinez closed her tablet. "Then we need a new strategy. We need someone with direct knowledge of Steele's planning, someone who was in the room when decisions were made." "His staff," Park suggested. "His executive officer, his adjutant, someone who saw the witness statements being drafted before the incident happened." "They're all loyal to Steele," Hayes said. "They'll never flip." Sarah's mind raced. She thought about Braxton's description of seeing draft statements in Steele's office, about the 3 soldiers who'd testified against her, about how quickly everything had been coordinated. What if we don't need them to flip? What if we just need them to talk? Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Steele's staff thinks they're safe. They think the plan worked. What if we make them believe we already have evidence of the conspiracy? Make them think someone already talked?" "You want to bluff them. I want to scare them. People make mistakes when they're scared. They get defensive. They say too much, trying to protect themselves. That's risky. Everything about this is risky." Martinez considered. "We'd need to coordinate carefully. Can't appear to be witness tampering. But if we approach them for routine interviews and happen to mention we'd received information about witness coordination, they'd panic," Park finished. "Start pointing fingers at each other. Classic prisoner's dilemma." "Do it," Sarah said. "Today, before Steele has time to coordinate their stories further." Admiral Ross returned looking agitated. "I just spoke with General Hodges. She's willing to testify, but she's concerned about retaliation. Apparently her pension has been under review for unrelated reasons, suspiciously convenient timing." "They're threatening her," Sarah said, "just like they threatened Braxton's family." "Welcome to institutional warfare," Ross said grimly. "This is how they operate. No direct threats, just subtle pressure. Problems that mysteriously appear. Opportunities that mysteriously disappear." Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Colonel Brennan, this is Captain Michael Chen. I'm the adjutant for Colonel Steele." Sarah's eyes widened. She hit the speaker button. "Yes, Captain. I need to speak with you, in person, without anyone from Colonel Steele's staff present." Martinez was already recording the call. She mouthed the word "careful." "Why would you need to speak with me, Captain? We're on opposite sides of a court-martial." "Because I think Colonel Steele is going to throw me under the bus, and I'd like to avoid that if possible." Everyone in the room leaned forward. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me?" "There's a coffee shop off base. Rosie's, 1 hour." "How do I know this isn't a setup?" "You don't. But I'm willing to take a polygraph if necessary. I have information you need. Information that will change everything." The line went dead. Martinez looked at Sarah. "Thoughts?" "It's either a trap or a breakthrough. Either way, we have to take the meeting. You can't go alone." "I'll go with her," Hayes volunteered. "We can wire her, record everything." "I'll contact the FBI," Ross said. "If Chen is alleging criminal conspiracy, this goes beyond military jurisdiction. We need federal involvement." "We have less than an hour," Sarah said. "Let's move." 45 minutes later, Sarah walked into Rosie's coffee shop wearing a wire so small she couldn't even feel it. Hayes sat at a corner table pretending to read a book. 2 FBI agents were in an unmarked van outside. Admiral Ross and Martinez listened from the operations center back at base. Captain Chen was already there, sitting at a booth in the back. He looked young, maybe 30, and absolutely terrified. Sarah slid into the booth across from him. Talk. I've been Colonel Steele's adjutant for 18 months. I've seen things, heard things, written things I'm not proud of. What kind of things? Those witness statements about you threatening Sergeant Braxton, I drafted them 3 days before the demonstration happened. Steele told me exactly what to write. He had the whole scenario planned. Sarah felt adrenaline spike through her system. You have proof of this. I have the original drafts, time-stamped, on my personal laptop. I kept copies because I was worried about exactly this situation. Worried he'd use me as a scapegoat. Why are you coming forward now? Because this morning Steele called me into his office and asked me to sign a statement saying you'd attempted to bribe me for false testimony. He wants to add witness tampering to your charges. I've never spoken to you before today. I know. That's when I realized he's willing to destroy anyone to protect himself, including me. Sarah kept her voice steady. What do you want, Captain? Immunity. Full immunity from prosecution. I'll testify to everything. The pre-written statements, the coordination with Senator Grimes, the systematic discrimination against female personnel, all of it. But I need protection. I can't promise immunity, that's up to prosecutors. Then I need to speak with Admiral Ross, directly, today. I can arrange that. Chen's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. I'm sending you a file right now, encrypted. It contains copies of emails between Steele and Grimes, between Steele and his co-conspirators, meeting notes, plans to discredit female officers, evidence of witness coordination in at least 4 other cases before yours. Sarah's phone chimed. File received. If anything happens to me, Chen continued, if I disappear or suddenly have an accident or get transferred to Alaska, that file gets released to the media. Every major news outlet. I've set up a dead man's switch. Smart. I learned from watching Steele. He's paranoid about documentation, keeps everything, control through information. But that means there's a paper trail. Everything he's done is documented somewhere. Where? His personal safe, in his office. I don't have access, but I know the combination. He made me witness him opening it once. Didn't realize I'd memorized the sequence. Sarah felt like she'd been electrocuted. You want us to break into his office. I want you to have a legitimate reason to access his office. Search warrant, Inspector General review. Something legal. But once you're in there, you need to know where to look. Martinez's voice came through Sarah's earpiece. This is entrapment territory. Be very careful what you agree to. Sarah chose her words precisely. I appreciate the information, Captain. If the appropriate authorities decide to pursue a legitimate investigation, I'm sure they'll find whatever evidence exists. Chen leaned forward. Colonel, you need to understand something. Steele isn't just one officer with prejudices. He's part of a network. There are dozens of officers throughout the military who think like him, who believe integration was a mistake. They're coordinating, sharing strategies, helping each other maintain the old culture. You have proof of this network. Some. Enough to start connecting dots. But most of it's careful, plausibly deniable. They use encrypted messaging apps, meet at conferences, communicate through intermediaries. Sarah's earpiece crackled. Admiral Ross's voice. Get him to agree to a formal interview. Today. I'm contacting DOD Inspector General now. Captain Chen, would you be willing to provide a formal statement to the Inspector General's office with legal counsel present? Chen hesitated. If I get immunity, yes. I can't promise that. But I can promise that Admiral Ross will personally ensure your safety while this investigation proceeds. Admiral Ross. Chen laughed bitterly. Steele hates her. Says she's part of the feminist infiltration of the Pentagon. Says she's using you as a weapon against traditional military values. Traditional military values like discrimination and harassment. In his mind, those aren't discrimination, they're standards. He genuinely believes women in combat roles weaken the military. He sees himself as protecting something essential. He's destroying careers. He thinks he's saving the military from political correctness. Chen stood abruptly. I have to get back before I'm missed. Check your email in 1 hour. I'm sending you everything I have. Copies of copies. Insurance. He walked out without another word. Sarah sat there for a moment processing everything that had just happened. Hayes appeared at her booth. Did you get all that? Every word, recorded and backed up. This is it, isn't it? This is how we take him down. Maybe. Or maybe Chen's another plant. Another layer of Steele's trap. You think he's lying? I think scared people sometimes tell the truth and sometimes say whatever they think you want to hear. We need to verify everything before we trust any of it. They walked outside to find Admiral Ross waiting in an unmarked sedan. She rolled down the window. Get in. They did. Ross pulled into traffic, driving aimlessly while they talked. The FBI is very interested in Captain Chen's allegations. If he's telling the truth about a coordinated network of officers working to undermine integration, that's a conspiracy. Federal crime. Military tribunal would lose jurisdiction. Steele would fight that, Sarah said. Of course. But it buys us time, and it raises the stakes. Right now, this is about you and one incident. If it becomes about systemic corruption, suddenly, everyone involved has exposure. Senator Grimes will protect Steele. Grimes has his own problems. His opponent in the next election is already using your viral video in campaign ads, showing Steele's connection to Grimes, painting him as anti-women. Grimes can't afford to be too publicly supportive right now. Sarah's phone chimed. Email from Captain Chen. Subject line, insurance policy. She opened it. 37 files, emails, memos, meeting notes, photos of documents, a comprehensive archive of Colonel Steele's 3-year campaign against women in combat roles. Jesus Christ, Sarah whispered. Ross glanced over. Good. Better than good. This is everything. Names, dates, specific incidents. Chen documented everything. Then we move now, before Steele realizes what happened. I'm calling the Inspector General. We're getting a warrant for Steele's office. Today. Everything moved fast after that. Within 2 hours, a team from the IG's office descended on Fort Carson. Within 3 hours, they had a warrant. Within 4 hours, they were removing boxes of documents from Colonel Steele's office while he stood in the hallway, his face purple with rage. Sarah watched from a distance as Steele screamed at the IG investigators, demanding to know who authorized the search, threatening to call his contacts at the Pentagon, invoking Senator Grimes's name like a magic spell. Nobody was impressed. Colonel Steele, you're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into multiple allegations of misconduct, conspiracy, and violation of federal law. The lead investigator's voice carried across the hallway. You are ordered to surrender your credentials and weapon. You are not to contact any witnesses or personnel involved in this investigation. Do you understand these instructions? Steele looked like he wanted to attack someone. His hands clenched into fists. His breathing came hard and fast. This is a witch hunt, a political attack by radical feminists who want to destroy the military from within. Do you understand these instructions, Colonel? I understand that my career is being destroyed by lies and manipulation. Sir, do you understand the instructions you've been given? Steele's jaw worked. Finally, through clenched teeth, yes. Your service weapon, please. Steele unbuckled his sidearm and handed it over with visible reluctance. He looked up, scanning the crowd that had gathered, and his eyes locked on Sarah. The hatred in that look was pure and absolute. Sarah met his gaze calmly, refusing to look away first. Finally, Steele turned and walked away, escorted by 2 MPs. The crowd of watching soldiers parted silently to let him through. Captain Hayes appeared at Sarah's elbow. Is it over? Not even close. This is just the beginning of the real fight. What happens now? Now we wait. The IG investigates. The FBI investigates. Lawyers argue. Media speculates. And somewhere in all that chaos, the truth comes out. You think we'll win? Sarah thought about the 32 women who'd come forward, about Lieutenant Foster's courage, about Captain Chen's decision to risk everything, about Sergeant Braxton lying in a hospital bed realizing he'd been used. I think we already won. Everything after this is just documentation. Her phone rang. Martinez. We have a problem. Of course we do. Senator Grimes just held a press conference. He's claiming this is a politically motivated investigation designed to silence conservative voices in the military. He's calling for congressional hearings. He's demanding Admiral Ross be removed from the case for bias. Can he do that? He's a U.S. senator. He can do whatever he wants. Question is whether anyone listens. Sarah looked at Hayes. Get me a TV. I want to see this. They found a television in the break room. CNN was replaying Grimes's press conference. The senator stood behind a podium, American flag to his left, looking gravely concerned. What we're witnessing is a dangerous overreach by military bureaucrats who want to impose a radical social agenda on our armed forces. Colonel Steele is a decorated veteran being persecuted for defending traditional military excellence. Colonel Brennan assaulted a young sergeant, and now she's using political connections to avoid accountability. This is exactly what's wrong with the modern military. He's good, Hayes muttered. He's making you sound like the villain. Wait for it, Sarah said. The CNN anchor cut to analysis. A panel of experts, and sitting in the center was someone Sarah recognized immediately, General Patricia Hodges, former head of Army personnel, the woman Admiral Ross had contacted for testimony. Senator Grimes's characterization is fundamentally dishonest, Hodges said, her voice calm but firm. I attempted to investigate Fort Carson's integration record 2 years ago and was systematically blocked. Colonel Steele and officers like him have been conducting a coordinated campaign to undermine women in combat roles. This isn't about political correctness. It's about officers violating federal law. But General, the anchor pressed, don't you think there are legitimate concerns about combat effectiveness when integrating women into traditionally male units? There are always concerns when any change happens, but the data is clear. Women perform at equivalent levels when given equivalent training and opportunities. The problem isn't women's capability. The problem is officers who refuse to give them a fair chance. Another panelist jumped in. But what about Colonel Brennan putting a sergeant in the hospital? Doesn't that suggest some kind of instability? Hodges smiled. It suggests a highly trained combat veteran responding appropriately to a physical challenge from an aggressive opponent who publicly humiliated her. Sergeant Braxton made a mistake. He challenged someone with decades more experience and skill. He lost. That's not instability. That's competence. Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. She's good, Hayes said. She's telling the truth. That's better than being good. The CNN segment continued. More experts, more analysis. The story was shifting. From troubled female officer attacks young soldier to systemic discrimination finally exposed. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from former SEAL teammates, emails from women she'd served with years ago, messages from people she'd never met thanking her for fighting back. One text stood out, from Sergeant Braxton. I'm sorry for everything. Steele threatened my family, but I should have been stronger. I'm testifying. For real this time. Whatever it costs. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Thank you. That took courage. Hayes was reading over her shoulder. He's going to get destroyed for this. Probably. But he's doing the right thing anyway. That counts for something. Admiral Ross appeared in the doorway. We need to talk. Senator Grimes isn't done. He's calling for a full Senate hearing on military integration policies. He wants to subpoena you, me, Steele, and everyone involved. Turn this into a public spectacle. Let him. Ross raised an eyebrow. You want a Senate hearing? I want the truth to come out. If it takes a Senate hearing, fine. Let Grimes put me on national television. Let him question my record. I'll answer every question honestly, and let America decide who they believe. Sarah's Senate hearings are brutal. They'll dig into everything, every mission, every relationship, every... Let them dig. I have nothing to hide. Can Steele say the same? Ross smiled slowly. No, he cannot. Then let's give the senator his hearing. Let's put this entire mess in front of the country and see what happens. Hayes looked between them. You're both insane. We're both military, Sarah corrected. We know how to fight. And right now, fighting in public is exactly what needs to happen. The sun was setting over Fort Carson. Sarah stood at the window watching the base transition to evening routine. Somewhere out there, 32 women were waiting to see if their courage would matter. Somewhere, Sergeant Braxton was preparing to face the consequences of telling the truth. Somewhere, Captain Chen was probably terrified about what he'd set in motion. And somewhere, Colonel Richard Steele was plotting his next move. Sarah felt haze come up beside her. "Ma'am, are you scared?" "Terrified?" "You don't look it." "That's because I've had a lot of practice being terrified. You don't survive 18 years as a SEAL without learning how to function while scared." "What happens tomorrow?" Sarah turned from the window. "Tomorrow we keep fighting. The IG finishes their investigation. The FBI builds their case. Martinez prepares for trial. And we wait to see if Captain Chen's evidence holds up under scrutiny. And if it doesn't, then we fight with what we have left. We don't quit. We don't surrender. We stand up and we fight until someone makes us stop." "I'm glad you're on our side, ma'am," Sarah smiled. "I'm glad there's still an our side to fight for." They walked out of the break room together into the Colorado evening. The video of Sarah taking down Braxton had passed 50 million views. The internet was ablaze with debate. The military was watching. Congress was watching. America was watching. And tomorrow, one way or another, the real battle would begin. The hearing room in the Russell Senate office building felt like a gladiatorial arena dressed up in mahogany and marble. Sarah sat at the witness table, her uniform immaculate, her hands folded calmly in front of her. Behind her, the gallery was packed with media, military personnel, and activists from both sides of the integration debate. Senator Harold Grimes sat at the center of the committee panel looking like he'd already won. To his right sat 3 senators who'd made careers opposing military reforms. To his left, 2 younger senators who'd been vocal advocates for integration. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. It was designed to be a spectacle. "Colonel Brennan, thank you for appearing before this committee." Grimes began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "I know these circumstances must be difficult for you." "Not particularly, Senator. I've faced much worse." A ripple of laughter from the gallery. Grimes's smile tightened. "Let's begin with the incident that brought us here. On the morning of November 8th, you physically assaulted Sergeant Tyler Braxton in front of 500 troops. Is that correct?" "No, Senator. That's not correct." "You didn't put Sergeant Braxton in the hospital with a dislocated shoulder. I engaged in a sanctioned training exercise after Sergeant Braxton challenged me. He was injured during that exercise, but assault implies criminal intent. There was none. You're a 52-year-old woman. He's a 29-year-old combat athlete. Don't you think accepting that challenge showed poor judgment?" Martinez leaned forward to object, but Sarah put a hand on her arm. She wanted to answer this. "Senator, I'm a 52-year-old woman with 28 years of military service, 18 of those years as a Navy SEAL. I hold the Navy Cross for valor in combat. I've trained special operations personnel across 3 continents. My age and gender don't determine my capability. My record does. And yet you felt the need to prove something by hospitalizing a young soldier. I felt the need to defend myself when publicly disrespected and physically challenged. If I'd backed down, if I'd walked away, what message does that send? That female officers should accept humiliation. That age disqualifies you from defending your dignity." Senator Patricia Morrison. One of the younger committee members leaned forward. "Colonel Brennan, can you describe exactly what Sergeant Braxton said to you before the incident?" "He told me to go home, said this was real soldier work, suggested I stick to my spreadsheets and let the warriors handle combat. He made it clear he viewed me as incompetent based solely on my age and gender." "And how did that make you feel?" "Angry, disappointed, but mostly determined to show him he was wrong." Grimes jumped back in. "So you admit you were motivated by anger?" "I admit I was motivated by the need to correct a dangerous misconception. Sergeant Braxton wasn't just insulting me. He was insulting every female service member, every older soldier, everyone who doesn't fit his narrow definition of what a warrior looks like. By putting him in the hospital. By defending myself when he challenged me to physical combat. Senator, if a male colonel had been challenged the same way and responded identically, would we be having this hearing? The question hung in the air. Several senators shifted uncomfortably. Senator James Bradford, a retired Army general himself, spoke up. Colonel, I've reviewed your service record. It's exemplary. But there are concerns about this incident setting a precedent. Officers using force against enlisted personnel. Where do we draw the line? The line is exactly where it's always been, Senator. Sanctioned training exercises with clear rules and referee oversight. That's what happened. The only unusual element was that an older female officer demonstrated superior combat skills. That shouldn't be controversial. It should be celebrated. Grimes flipped through papers. Let's talk about the aftermath. Within 24 hours of this incident, you were soliciting testimony from female soldiers about discrimination, organizing what appears to be a coordinated campaign against Colonel Steele. Doesn't that suggest a premeditated agenda? It suggests I responded to an opportunity. Female soldiers had been suffering under Colonel Steele's command for years. They finally saw someone stand up to the culture he'd created. They felt safe enough to come forward. That's not a conspiracy, Senator. That's leadership. Leadership. Grimes's voice dripped with sarcasm. Is it leadership to weaponize accusations of discrimination to avoid accountability for your own actions? Martinez stood. Senator, that's inflammatory and assumes facts, not in evidence. I'll rephrase. Colonel Brennan, isn't it convenient that these allegations against Colonel Steele emerged exactly when you needed a defense against assault charges? Sarah leaned forward. Senator Lieutenant Foster had been documenting discrimination for 6 months before the incident. Captain Chen had been keeping records for 18 months. Sergeant Braxton himself described how Colonel Steele planned the entire confrontation days in advance. These aren't convenient coincidences. They're evidence of systematic abuse that was finally exposed. Or they're stories coordinated by someone desperate to avoid consequences. Senator Morrison interrupted again. Senator Grimes, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. You've been in regular communication with Colonel Steele. You've been coordinating strategy with him. Your chief of staff exchanged over 40 emails with Steele's office in the last month alone. Aren't you the one with a premeditated agenda here? The gallery erupted. Grimes hammered his gavel. That's outrageous. I communicate with military personnel as part of my oversight duties. You coordinate with officers working to undermine integration policies, Morrison shot back. The emails are public record now. We've all seen them. Grimes's face went purple. This hearing is about Colonel Brennan's conduct, not mine. This hearing is about whether a decorated officer defending herself should be destroyed for political purposes, Morrison countered. And I think we all know the answer. Bradford spoke again, his voice measured. Colonel Brennan, let me ask you directly. Do you believe you exercised appropriate judgment in accepting Sergeant Braxton's challenge? Sarah considered carefully. This was the real question, the one that mattered. Senator, in that moment, I had two choices. Accept the challenge and demonstrate that competence matters more than demographics, or decline and reinforce every stereotype about women being too weak, too old, too scared to compete. I chose to compete. I chose to win. If given the same circumstances again, I'd make the same choice. Even knowing it would lead to all this. Especially knowing it would lead to all this. Because now we're having conversations that should have happened years ago. We're examining policies that should have been examined. We're exposing discrimination that should have been stopped. Sergeant Braxton's shoulder will heal. But the careers destroyed by systematic discrimination, those don't heal without institutional change. Grimes tried to regain control. You're very eloquent, Colonel. But let's discuss specifics. The Inspector General's investigation found evidence of concerning communications between you and several female soldiers prior to the incident. Private meetings, after-hours conversations. Doesn't that suggest coordination? It suggests mentorship, something I've done throughout my career. Female soldiers sought my advice because I'm one of the highest-ranking women in combat operations. That's not conspiracy. That's what senior officers are supposed to do. And Captain Chen, the officer who conveniently appeared with evidence against Colonel Steele exactly when you needed it. Captain Chen came forward because his conscience wouldn't let him stay silent. because he saw Colonel Steele preparing to sacrifice him to protect himself. That's courage, Senator. Something I suspect you're not familiar with. The gallery gasped. Martinez closed her eyes. Sarah had just crossed a line. Grimes leaned forward, his voice dangerous. Colonel, I've served my country for 30 years in public office. And I've served mine for 28 years in uniform. The difference is, I faced actual danger. You faced difficult committee meetings. You're out of line. I'm telling the truth. Something this committee seems allergic to. Bradford intervened. Let's take a 15-minute recess. Everyone needs to cool down. The gavel came down. Sarah stood, her legs shaking slightly from adrenaline. Martinez grabbed her arm. What the hell was that? That was me being done with political theater. You just antagonized the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Good. Let him be antagonized. Let him show everyone who he really is. They moved to a private conference room. Admiral Ross was waiting along with Hayes and several other observers. That was either brilliant or suicidal, Ross said. I'm not sure which. It was honest. Grimes is a bully. You don't negotiate with bullies. You punch back. You can't punch a senator, Sarah. I just did, with words, on national television. Ross's phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her expression changed. Oh my God. What? The video clip of you calling out Grimes. It's already viral. 5 million views in 10 minutes. The comments are overwhelmingly in your favor. Hayes was checking her own phone. CNN is calling it the moment of the hearing. Fox News is defending you. MSNBC is calling for Grimes to recuse himself. Sarah felt dizzy. This is insane. This is what happens when someone finally says what everyone's thinking, Ross said. You just became a folk hero. Martinez was pacing. Okay, we can use this. When we go back, we play it calm. No more attacks. Let Grimes self-destruct trying to respond to public backlash. They returned to the hearing room to find it even more packed than before. Word had spread. More media, more observers, more cameras. Grimes looked like he'd aged 10 years in 15 minutes. His staff kept showing him phone screens. His expression grew darker with each one. We'll resume, he said tightly. Colonel Brennan, let's move on to Senator Morrison interrupted. Before we continue, I'd like to enter into the record the complete findings of the Inspector General's investigation into Fort Carson. That's not appropriate at this time, Grimes snapped. It's completely appropriate. The investigation concludes that Colonel Steele systematically discriminated against female personnel, that he coordinated with at least 17 other officers to undermine integration protocols, that he falsified readiness reports to make women appear less capable than they were. This is directly relevant to Colonel Brennan's defense. The IG report is preliminary and incomplete. It's comprehensive and damning, and it supports everything Colonel Brennan has said. Bradford leaned in. Senator Grimes, I think we need to hear this. Grimes looked like he wanted to refuse, but he was trapped. The entire hearing was being broadcast live. Refusing would look like a cover-up. Fine. Enter it into the record. Morrison began reading key findings, each one more devastating than the last. Evidence of discrimination, proof of coordination, documentation of Steele's deliberate campaign to undermine integration. Sarah watched Grimes's face as his entire narrative collapsed in real time. Furthermore, Morrison continued, the report notes that Colonel Brennan's actions, while unorthodox, were consistent with defending herself against a hostile subordinate. The report recommends all charges against her be dropped. It further recommends Colonel Steele face court-martial for conduct unbecoming conspiracy and violation of federal integration statutes. The gallery erupted, reporters typing frantically, observers murmuring, cameras flashing. Grimes hammered his gavel uselessly. Order, order. But order was gone. The hearing had become a rout. Senator Bradford spoke over the noise. Colonel Brennan, it appears the facts are in your favor. Do you have any final statement you'd like to make? Sarah stood. The room gradually quieted. I'd like to thank the committee for their time. I'd like to thank the 32 women who came forward with their stories despite fear of retaliation. I'd like to thank Captain Chen for his courage. I'd like to thank Sergeant Braxton for ultimately choosing truth over convenience. She paused. But most of all, I'd like to say something to every woman serving in the military, every older soldier, every person who's been told they don't belong. Your service matters. Your capability matters. Don't let anyone define you by their limitations. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old, too female, too different to be excellent. Prove them wrong. Every single day, prove them wrong. The gallery erupted in applause. Grimes hammered his gavel but made no attempt to stop it. He looked defeated. "This hearing is adjourned," he said weakly. Sarah walked out of the hearing room to a mob of reporters. Martinez and Hayes flanked her, running interference, but Sarah stopped. "I'll take a few questions. Colonel Brennan, what happens now? Now the military justice system does its job. Colonel Steele faces accountability. Policies get reformed, and we keep working to make the military a place where everyone who's qualified gets a fair chance. What about your career? My career is whatever the Army decides it should be, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm 52 years old, and I've got at least another decade of service in me. What do you say to people who think women shouldn't be in combat roles? I say watch the video. I didn't just defend myself. I dominated. That's not luck. That's not accident. That's skill earned through decades of training and experience. If you can't see that the problem isn't me, it's you." Final question. Do you regret what happened with Sergeant Braxton? Sarah thought about it. Really thought about it. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that it took something that dramatic to force these conversations. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret proving that age and gender don't determine capability. And I don't regret the changes that are coming because of it." She walked away to continuing applause. Outside the Senate building, protesters lined both sides. Some held signs supporting her. Others held signs condemning her. Both sides were passionate. Admiral Ross appeared beside her. That was quite a performance. That was exhausting. "The Pentagon wants to see you tomorrow. They're discussing your next assignment." "I thought I was finishing out my career at Fort Carson." "You were, until you became the most famous female officer in America. Now they're not sure what to do with you. I just want to serve." "I know, but you're not just a soldier anymore. You're a symbol. The question is what we do with that." Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She was about to ignore it when something made her answer. "Colonel Brennan? This is Tyler Braxton." Sarah stopped walking. "Sergeant, how's the shoulder?" "Healing. Physical therapy starts next week. But that's not why I'm calling." He paused. "I testified today to the IG, told them everything about Steele's planning, about the coached witnesses, about how he manipulated me. That took courage." "No, what you did took courage. I just finally stopped being a coward." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm probably going to be discharged. Conduct unbecoming. They're being generous, calling it administrative instead of dishonorable. I'm sorry. Don't be. I earned it. But I wanted you to know something. My little sister is 17. She's been watching all this. Watching you. She texted me this morning and said she's going to join the Army, going to prove she's just as capable as any man, because of you." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "What's her name?" "Ashley. Ashley Braxton. Tell Ashley I look forward to serving with her someday." "I will. And Colonel, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was too stupid to deserve it." The line went dead. Sarah stood on the steps of the Senate building, Washington, D.C., spreading out before her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Martinez appeared at her elbow. "We need to talk about next steps. The court-martial is officially dropped, all charges dismissed, but there's going to be a formal review of Fort Carson's policies. They want you to testify." "Of course." "And there's something else. Several publishers want to talk to you about a book deal. Your story. The fight for integration. The whole thing." "I'm not done serving." "I know. But think about it. Your voice could reach millions, change minds, inspire people." Sarah thought about Ashley Braxton, 17 years old, and ready to serve because she'd seen someone fight back. Maybe. But first we finish this. We make sure Steele faces justice. We make sure the policies change. We make sure those 32 women get the opportunities they were denied. Always the warrior, Martinez said with a smile. Always. They walked to a waiting car. Hayes was already inside scrolling through messages. Ma'am, you need to see this. General Webb just announced his retirement, effective immediately. His statement says he takes full responsibility for the cultural issues at Fort Carson and believes new leadership is needed. Sarah felt no satisfaction, just sadness. Webb wasn't a villain. He was just a man who'd allowed problems to fester because confronting them was hard. What happens to Fort Carson now? Admiral Ross is being assigned as temporary commander. She's tasked with complete cultural reform, new training protocols, new accountability measures. It's basically a complete overhaul. That's what needs to happen. And ma'am, they're asking you to stay on as deputy commander. Work with Admiral Ross on the reforms. Sarah looked at Hayes. What do you think? I think you're the only person who can do it. You have the credibility, the respect, and after today you have the platform. I just wanted to serve quietly. Too late for that, Ross said, climbing into the car beside them. You're a symbol now. Might as well use it for something good. They drove through Washington traffic toward their hotel. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from around the world. Support, criticism, death threats, marriage proposals, the full spectrum of human response. One message stood out, from her mother who she hadn't spoken to in 6 months. I watched the hearing. Your father would be proud. I'm proud. Don't let them break you. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She typed back quickly. I won't. Love you. At the hotel, they gathered in Admiral Ross's suite to debrief. Martinez pulled up news coverage on the television. Every channel was covering the hearing. Most of it favorable, some of it vicious. You're trending #1 worldwide on Twitter, Hayes reported. The hashtag Justice for Brennan has 3 million tweets, but there's also a competing hashtag calling out stars with about 500,000. They're calling you insubordinate, dangerous, unfit for command. Let them, Sarah said. I didn't do this to be popular. No, you did it to be right, Ross said. And that's why you're winning. Martinez's phone rang. She answered, listened, then her expression changed to shock. Are you sure? Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you. She ended the call and looked at Sarah. That was the JAG Corps commander. Senator Grimes just announced he's not seeking re-election. Says he wants to spend more time with family. His chief of staff resigned an hour ago. The room fell silent. We broke a senator, Hayes whispered. No, Sarah corrected. He broke himself. We just exposed it. Ross stood and walked to the window. This is bigger than we thought. The network Steele and Grimes were part of the coordinated opposition to integration. It's all coming out now. We kicked over a rock and found an entire ecosystem underneath. How many officers are involved? IG estimates maybe 40 to 50 across all branches. Some active duty, some retired but still influential. They've been working together for years. Can we prosecute them all? Not all. Some were careful, stayed within legal boundaries while making life hell for women. But the worst ones, the ones who falsified reports, intimidated witnesses, violated direct orders, they're done. Sarah felt the weight of what they'd accomplished, and what still needed to happen. This is going to take years, isn't it, to really change the culture? Generations, probably, Ross said. But we started something. Momentum. Every young woman who saw you take down Braxton, every female soldier who found the courage to come forward, every Ashley Braxton who decides to serve because she saw someone fight back, they're all part of this now. No pressure, Sarah said wryly. Ross laughed. You're 52 years old and you just became the face of military integration reform. I'd say the pressure's already on. They ordered room service and spent the evening planning. New training protocols, accountability measures. ways to encourage reporting without fear of retaliation. It was technical, detailed work, the kind of work that actually changed institutions. Around midnight, Hayes fell asleep in her chair. Martinez was still making notes. Ross was on her third conference call with Pentagon officials. Sarah stood at the window looking out over Washington. Somewhere in this city, Senator Grimes was facing the end of his political career. Somewhere Colonel Steele was preparing for court-martial. Somewhere 32 women were sleeping better, knowing their voices had been heard. And somewhere, a 17-year-old named Ashley Braxton was dreaming about serving her country. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the window. 52 years old, 28 years of service. A career that should have been winding down, but instead had just hit a second peak. Her phone buzzed one more time. Message from Captain Chen. FBI granted me immunity. I'm testifying against everyone, all the networks, all the coordination. It's all going to come out. Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing. Sarah smiled. Courage was contagious. That's what they were really fighting for. Not policies or protocols. Courage. The courage to stand up. The courage to speak out. The courage to demand better. Martinez stirred. Ma'am, you should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. They're all long days now. Yeah, but these are the good long days. The ones that matter. Sarah nodded. Martinez was right. These were the days that mattered. The days when you fought for something bigger than yourself. When you stood up even knowing it might cost you everything. When you proved that capability mattered more than demographics. She thought about walking onto that combat mat 3 weeks ago. How simple it had seemed. Answer a challenge. Defend yourself. Win. She'd had no idea it would lead here. To Senate hearings and national attention and the systematic exposure of institutional discrimination. But maybe that's how change always happened. One moment of courage leading to another. Building momentum until something that seemed impossible became inevitable. Sarah finally went to her room and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. She was asleep in seconds, exhausted, but satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more hearings, more testimony, more fights. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Sarah Brennan slept peacefully. Because she knew whatever came next, she'd already won the battle that mattered. The battle to stand up, the battle to fight back, the battle to prove that no one ever should accept being told they don't belong. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same training ground where everything had started. The morning sun cast familiar shadows, but everything else had changed. Fort Carson had new leadership, new protocols, and a new culture that was still finding its footing. Ma'am, they're ready for you, Hayes said, appearing at her side. The young captain had been promoted to major and now served as Sarah's executive officer. Her confidence had grown alongside her rank. Sarah nodded and walked toward the demonstration area where 200 soldiers had gathered. Not 500 like before. This was different, smaller, more intimate, more real. Admiral Ross, now a permanent fixture as Fort Carson's commander, stood at the center addressing the troops. For those who don't know, we're here today to launch the new Combat Integration Excellence Program. This isn't just about policy changes or new regulations. It's about fundamentally rethinking how we train, how we evaluate, and how we lead. Sarah joined Ross at the front. The faces looking back at her were younger, now more diverse, more hopeful. Among them, she spotted Lieutenant Kara Foster, no longer terrified, but standing tall in her new assignment as a combat training instructor. Colonel Brennan has agreed to lead this program, Ross continued. She'll be developing curriculum training instructors and ensuring that every soldier, regardless of gender, age, or background, has the opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities on merit alone. Polite applause. Sarah stepped forward. I'm not going to give you a speech about how far we've come. You've all seen the news. You know what happened here 6 months ago. She paused. What I want to talk about is what happens next, because change isn't a moment. It's a process, and we're just getting started. A hand raised. Young male soldier, maybe 22. Ma'am, some of us are worried that standards are being lowered. that integration means everyone has to pretend men and women are exactly the same physically. Sarah appreciated the honesty. Good question. Standards aren't being lowered. They're being clarified. The standard is mission accomplishment. Can you do the job you're assigned? That's what matters. Some jobs require raw strength. Some require endurance. Some require precision. Some require speed. We're learning to match people to roles based on capability, not assumptions. Another hand, female soldier looking nervous. Ma'am, how do we deal with soldiers who still don't think women belong in combat roles? You prove them wrong, every single day. You outwork them, outthink them, outperform them. And when they still don't believe, you ignore them and keep excelling. Eventually they either adapt or they leave. Either way, you win. A third hand, older sergeant, probably late 40s. Colonel, what about those of us who aren't young anymore? The Army keeps talking about youth and fitness. Where do experienced soldiers fit? Sarah smiled. Sergeant, I'm 52 years old. I took down Fort Carson's combat champion 6 months ago. You tell me where experienced soldiers fit. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The sergeant grinned. The military has always had a stupid obsession with youth, Sarah continued. As if experience doesn't matter. As if wisdom counts for nothing. We're changing that too. Age brings judgment, pattern recognition, the ability to stay calm under pressure. Those are force multipliers. We need to value them. Hayes stepped forward. Ma'am, we're running short on time. The media briefing starts in 20 minutes. Sarah nodded. Dismissed. Training schedule starts tomorrow. Be ready to work harder than you ever have. Because excellence isn't easy, but it's worth it. The soldiers dispersed. Sarah started to follow, but Lieutenant Foster approached looking hesitant. Ma'am, do you have a moment? Of course. Foster glanced around to ensure privacy. I wanted to thank you for everything, for giving me the courage to come forward, for protecting me when Steele's people tried to retaliate, for showing me what leadership looks like. You protected yourself, Lieutenant. I just created the space for you to be heard. It's more than that. Before you came to Fort Carson, I was planning to leave the military. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant harassment, the feeling that no matter how hard I worked, I'd never be good enough. Foster's voice caught. You changed that. Not just for me, for all of us. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on her shoulders. Don't put me on a pedestal, Kara. I'm just a soldier who got tired of accepting unacceptable things. That's exactly why you're worth following. Foster hesitated. There's something else. My sister is enlisting next month, because of you. She's been following everything that happened. Says she wants to serve in a military where women are valued. What's her name? Emma. Emma Foster. She's 20 years old and scared to death, but determined. Bring her to see me when she arrives. I'll make sure she gets properly mentored. Foster's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, ma'am. The media briefing was held in the base conference center. 30 reporters crammed into a space designed for 20. Sarah sat at a table with Admiral Ross and Major Hayes facing a wall of cameras and recording devices. Colonel Brennan, 6 months ago, you were facing court-martial. Now you're heading a major reform initiative. How does that feel? The reporter from CNN looked genuinely curious. It feels like the system worked. Slowly, imperfectly. But it worked. The truth came out. Bad actors were held accountable. Policies changed. That's all I ever wanted. What happened to Colonel Steele? Colonel Steele was court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. He's facing additional federal charges related to conspiracy and obstruction of justice. That's all I can say about an ongoing legal matter. And Senator Grimes. Senator Grimes is a civilian matter, not my concern. Another reporter jumped in. There's been criticism that you've become too political, that you're more activist than soldier now. How do you respond? Sarah leaned forward. I respond by pointing out that I'm still in uniform, still serving, still training soldiers. The only thing that's changed is that I'm no longer quiet about injustice. If that makes me political, then every soldier who's ever stood up for their troops is political. I'll wear that label proudly. Colonel, some veterans groups have called you divisive, said you're creating conflict where none existed. Some veterans groups are run by people who benefited from the old system. They don't like change because change threatens their status. I understand that. I don't care. Progress doesn't wait for everyone to be comfortable. Ross interjected smoothly. What Colonel Brennan is too modest to mention is that retention rates for women at Fort Carson have increased 42% in the last 6 months. Recruitment is up. Performance metrics are up. The data shows this isn't divisive. It's effective. Admiral Ross, there are reports that other bases are requesting Colonel Brennan to conduct similar assessments and training programs. Can you confirm? I can confirm that Colonel Brennan's expertise is in high demand. We're working to scale the program across multiple installations, but change takes time. We're being deliberate and thorough. A young reporter in the back raised her hand. Colonel Brennan, there's been a lot of discussion about the viral video. Over 100 million views now. Do you ever regret that it happened? That your life became so public? Sarah thought about Ashley Braxton deciding to enlist, about Emma Foster following her sister into service, about the hundreds of messages she'd received from women saying they'd found the courage to pursue military careers because they'd seen someone fight back. No, I don't regret it. I wish the circumstances had been different. I wish systematic discrimination hadn't existed in the first place. But given the reality we lived in, I'm glad that moment happened. I'm glad people saw it. I'm glad it started conversations. Even though it destroyed Colonel Steele's career, Colonel Steele destroyed his own career. I just exposed what he'd been doing. There's a difference. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes. Questions about implementation details, budget allocations, timeline projections, the mundane machinery of institutional change. Finally, Admiral Ross called an end. Thank you all for coming. We'll provide updates quarterly as the program develops. They escaped to Ross's office. Sarah collapsed into a chair while Hayes poured coffee. That went well, Ross said. You're getting better at handling the media. I'm getting tired of handling the media. I want to get back to actual work. This is actual work. Public perception matters. Congressional support matters. We need both to make lasting change. Sarah sipped her coffee and grimaced. Still terrible. Some things never changed. What's the latest on the network investigation? Ross's expression darkened. FBI has identified 43 officers across all branches who were actively coordinating to undermine integration. 17 are facing charges. The rest are being quietly pushed into retirement. That's not enough. It's what's politically feasible. Some of them have powerful connections. The Pentagon is picking its battles. So some of them just walk away. With ruined reputations and no chance of promotion, it's not justice, but it's consequence. Ross set down her coffee cup. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something. The Secretary of Defense wants to meet with you next week. About what? He wouldn't say, but my guess is they're considering promoting you to Brigadier General. 1 star. You'd be one of the highest-ranking female combat veterans in military history. Sarah felt her stomach flip. That's insane. That's recognition. You've earned it 10 times over. I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be a soldier. You're both, whether you like it or not. Ross leaned forward. Listen to me. You can do more good as a general than as a colonel. More authority, more influence, more ability to protect the reforms we're implementing. More politics, more media, more theater. Yes, also more power to make sure what happened to you and those 32 women never happens again. Isn't that worth it? Sarah didn't answer. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, soldiers were training, running, learning, growing. The next generation preparing to serve. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. The secretary wants an answer by Friday. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Sergeant Tyler Braxton sat on the steps, his right arm still in a light brace, looking nervous. Sergeant, I didn't expect to see you here. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, ma'am, but I needed to talk to you before I leave. You're being discharged. Tomorrow. Administrative discharge. Could have been worse. They're giving me an honorable based on my service record before all this happened. He stood awkwardly. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Sarah unlocked her door and gestured inside. Braxton followed, moving carefully, favoring his injured shoulder. How's the recovery? Physical therapist says I'll regain about 90% function. Enough for civilian work. Not enough for active combat duty. He smiled sadly. Ironic, right? I spent my whole career being the toughest guy around. And one move from a 52-year-old woman ended it. You ended it, Sergeant. By making choices. By letting steel manipulate you. Own that. I do, that's why I'm here. Braxton sat down heavily. I've been offered a job. Teaching at a civilian security training facility. Good money, good benefits. But I wanted your advice before I take it. Why would you want my advice? Because you're the only person who's been straight with me through all this. Everyone else either coddled me or condemned me. You just told me the truth. He looked at his damaged arm. The truth that I was arrogant. That I let my prejudices turn me into someone's weapon. That I had skill but no wisdom. And now I'm trying to figure out who I am without the uniform. Without the identity I built around being the toughest fighter. Without the validation of winning. Sarah sat across from him. Tyler, can I tell you something? The day I turned 48, the Navy told me I was too old for SEAL operations. Forced retirement from the only identity I'd ever known. I spent 4 years behind a Pentagon desk feeling worthless, feeling like my best days were behind me. But you weren't worthless. No, but I believed I was, because I let external validation define my worth. The uniform, the rank, the missions. When those were taken away, I didn't know who I was. She leaned forward. You're 29 years old. You have 60 years of life ahead of you. You can spend them mourning who you were, or you can figure out who you're going to become. That's the choice. How did you figure it out? I haven't. Not completely, but I stopped defining myself by what others thought of me. Started defining myself by what I knew to be true. That I'm skilled, that I'm capable, that age and circumstance don't determine worth. Actions do. Braxton was quiet for a long moment. My sister Ashley called me yesterday. Said she's starting basic training next month. Said she wants to be just like you. I remember. You told me about her. She asked me if I was proud of her, if I supported her decision. His voice cracked slightly. A year ago, I would have told her women don't belong in combat roles, that she should find something safer, something more appropriate. And now I told her to work harder than everyone else, to never accept anyone's limitations, to prove that capability matters more than demographics. He smiled. I told her she had a better role model than I ever did. Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen. That took growth, Tyler. That took getting my ass kicked by someone who knew better. He stood. I should go. But I wanted to thank you for not destroying me when you could have, for testifying that I deserved a second chance, for being better than I deserved. We all deserve second chances, Sergeant. The question is what we do with them. After Braxton left, Sarah sat alone in her quarters. Her phone showed 300 unread messages, interview requests, speaking invitations, book deals. Everyone wanted a piece of her story. She ignored them all and called her mother. Sarah, I was just thinking about you. Hi, Mom. How are you? Worried about you as always. I saw the news coverage. You look tired. I am tired. Then come home. Take leave. Rest. I can't. Too much work. Too many people counting on me. Her mother was quiet for a moment. You sound like your father. He always said that. Too many people counting on him. Right up until the day he died. The words hit like a physical blow. Mom, that's not fair. No, it's not. But it's true. Your father was a great soldier, a terrible husband, an absent father. He chose service over family every single time, and I supported it because I knew it was who he was. But I won't watch you make the same mistake. I'm not Dad. No, you're worse. At least your father had a team, had support. You're carrying this entire movement on your shoulders. It's too much for one person, Sarah. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. The question is whether you're brave enough to make it. They talked for another hour. About small things, family gossip, memories. By the end, Sarah felt more grounded than she had in weeks. Mom, they're thinking about promoting me to general. Do you want it? I don't know. It means more responsibility, more visibility, less time for actual soldiering. It also means more ability to protect the changes you fought for, more power to ensure your sacrifice meant something. Her mother paused. Your father never made general, died a captain. Sometimes I wonder what he could have accomplished with more rank, more authority. He accomplished plenty. He did. But imagine if he'd had the platform you have, the attention, the ability to influence policy at the highest levels. What could he have changed? Sarah thought about that long after the call ended. Her father had been a great soldier, but he'd operated in the shadows. Quiet heroism that few people ever knew about. She had the opposite problem. Too much attention, too much visibility. But maybe her mother was right. Maybe she could use that visibility for something lasting. Friday arrived faster than Sarah wanted. She found herself in a Pentagon office facing Secretary of Defense Michael Thornton. He was younger than she expected, maybe 55, with the kind of focused intensity that came from decades of high-stakes decision-making. Colonel Brennan, thank you for coming. Mr. Secretary, I'll get right to it. We want to promote you to Brigadier General, 1 star. You'd oversee the Combat Integration Task Force across all service branches. Budget of $40 million, staff of 200. Real authority to implement change. Sarah kept her expression neutral. That's generous, sir. It's strategic. You've become a symbol whether you wanted to or not. We can either ignore that and waste the opportunity, or we can leverage it to accelerate reforms that are decades overdue. And if I decline, Thornton smiled slightly, then you stay a colonel. Continue your work at Fort Carson. Still valuable, but limited in scope. The choice is yours. Can I ask a question, sir? Of course. Why me? There are officers with more seniority, more political experience, officers who haven't created massive controversies. Because you're not political. You didn't seek this. You just did your job when challenged. That authenticity resonates. People trust you in a way they don't trust career officers who've spent decades managing their images. Thornton leaned forward. Sarah, I'm not going to blow smoke. This job will be brutal. You'll face opposition from entrenched interests. You'll be attacked constantly. Your personal life will be scrutinized. Your every decision questioned. It will probably shorten your life by years from stress. You're really selling it, sir. I'm being honest, but I'm also telling you that if you take this job, you can change the military in ways that will echo for generations. Women who aren't even born yet will have opportunities because of decisions you make. That's the trade-off. Sarah thought about Ashley Braxton, Emma Foster, the hundreds of women who'd reached out to her, the thousands more who never would, but who were watching. I'll do it. Thornton nodded. Smart choice. You'll be officially promoted next month. Ceremony at the White House. President wants to personally pin your star. The president. You're a symbol, remember. He wants to be photographed supporting you. Don't worry, it's less political than it sounds. Every president loves a good military success story. Sarah left the Pentagon feeling like she'd just volunteered for a suicide mission, which in a way she had. Admiral Ross was waiting in the parking lot. Well, I said yes. Thank God. I was worried you'd turn it down out of stubbornness. I'm still stubborn, just stubborn in a different direction now. They drove back to Fort Carson in comfortable silence. Sarah watched Maryland countryside roll past, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From SEAL operator to desk colonel to viral sensation to general. None of it planned, all of it necessary. Ross, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret how your life turned out? The choices you made? The opportunities you had to sacrifice? Ross thought for a moment. Every day, and never. Both are true. That doesn't make sense. Sure it does. I regret missing my daughter's childhood because I was deployed. I regret the relationships that failed because I chose career over compromise. I regret 1,000 small moments I can never get back. She glanced at Sarah. But I don't regret the larger arc, the cumulative effect of all those choices. I'm Admiral Ross. I command a major installation. I'm implementing reforms that will help thousands of women. Would I trade that for a different life? No. But I'd change details if I could. How do you live with the contradiction? Same way you will. By accepting that perfection isn't possible. That we make choices with incomplete information and live with the consequences. That's all anyone can do. 1 month later, Sarah stood in the White House East Room wearing her dress uniform newly pinned with a single silver star. Her mother was there crying quietly. Admiral Ross stood at attention, beaming with pride. Major Hayes had her phone out, recording everything. The president finished his speech about courage and service and change. Photographers captured the moment for history. Sarah shook hands, accepted congratulations, played her part in the ceremony. But her mind was elsewhere. On Fort Carson, where Lieutenant Foster was teaching her first combat training class. On a civilian security facility where Tyler Braxton was helping students unlearn the prejudices he'd once embodied. On a basic training facility where Ashley Braxton and Emma Foster were learning what it meant to serve. That evening, Sarah returned to Fort Carson to find a surprise waiting. The training ground where she'd taken down Braxton had been renamed. A simple plaque marked it now. Brennan Training Complex, dedicated to the principle that capability, not demographics, determines excellence. She stood there alone as the sun set, thinking about everything that had happened. 6 months from controversial incident to brigadier general, 6 months from facing court-martial to leading systematic reform. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. General Brennan, this is Ashley Braxton. I just finished my first week of basic training. It's harder than I imagined. I wanted to quit 3 times. But then I remembered watching you fight my brother. Remembered you saying capability matters more than demographics. So I kept going. Thank you for showing me what's possible. Sarah typed back quickly. Keep pushing, Ashley. The hard days are what forge real soldiers. Proud of you. She looked at the plaque one more time, then walked toward her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Congressional testimony on integration policies, budget negotiations, media appearances, the grinding machinery of institutional change. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They'd won something real. Not perfect, not complete, but real. The video of her taking down Braxton had been viewed over 200 million times now. It had become a cultural touchstone, a moment that captured something larger than itself. But Sarah knew the truth. The video wasn't the victory. The video was just the spark. The real victory was Ashley Braxton pushing through basic training. Emma Foster choosing to serve. The 42% increase in female retention at Fort Carson. The 17 officers facing justice for discrimination. The policies changing across every military branch. The real victory was cultural shift. Slow, imperfect, but undeniable. Sarah entered her quarters and sat at her desk. One last email to write before she slept. To the 32 women who'd come forward 6 months ago. The ones who'd risked everything to tell their stories. Thank you. Your courage changed everything. The fight continues, but because of you, we're winning. Stay strong, stay proud, you made history. She hit send and leaned back in her chair. 53 years old, brigadier general, leading the most significant cultural reform in modern military history. Not bad for someone who was supposedly too old, too female, too past her prime to matter. Sarah smiled and thought about Sergeant Braxton's words that day on the training ground. Go home, lady. This is real soldier work. She hadn't gone home. She'd stayed and fought. She'd proven that real soldier work looked like her. Looked like every woman who refused to accept limitations. Looked like everyone who demanded to be judged on merit rather than demographics. The sergeant major who'd taught her that technique had said it best years ago during SEAL training. The most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate. Remember that. and make damn sure no one ever underestimates you. No one would underestimate her again, or any of the women following in her footsteps, because Sarah Brennan had done more than take down a sergeant in front of 500 troops. She'd taken down an entire system of discrimination. She'd proven that 52 wasn't too old to fight. She'd shown that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage. And she'd made it impossible for future generations to face the same barriers she had overcome. That was worth every sacrifice, every hard day, every moment of doubt. Sarah turned off the light and went to bed satisfied with the simple truth that had guided her entire career. When someone tells you to go home because you don't belong, sometimes the right answer is to plant your feet, stand your ground, and prove them catastrophically wrong.